calcium carbide and water produces acetylene gas, and kids would put this in here and ignite it and just make giant booms all day long.
You know, and I always just complained that toys nowadays weren't as cool as when I was a kid, but really, you know, I mean, if my parents had bought me something like this, I would have loved it.
And I feel like when you read old books and you look at the things that kids did and played with, you know, read some Mark Twain and stuff like that, you get the sense that it was a more innocent and fun age.
More innocent and fun with lots more fire.
So you can see on this footage a nice fireball exiting the air, and the mixture of gases is quite critical to the performance of this particular device. There's air, oxygen from the atmosphere in there, and acetylene gas being produced by the carbide reaction, and if you get it right, you get an extremely loud bang.
And it's also, it's really bright, and so old miners, right, used to use carbide lamps that they would wear on their helmets.
Yeah.
You know, this is...
So there's something very interesting to watch here. Look at that oscillation in the tube where the fireball sort of shoots back and forth. That's actually called the cadenation effect, where you have the gas burning and creating a compression wave, but sort of getting ahead of itself, and then it has to suck in more air to continue the combustion. And that's the principle behind the pulse jet, which was a World War II era invention, and the Germans used it on the V1 rocket, which I'm sure you're familiar with. So here's actually a pulse jet that some friends of mine made, demonstrating that effect being used for propulsion. This was that V1 was known as the buzz bomb by the English, who were the victims of it flying over from occupied France.
So what is, do you know what clearly the buzzing was caused by the jet? Was it because of the oscillation that produced a distinctive sound? Yeah,
it produced that and it had a characteristic frequency. And
right.
So that buzz was just a continuous noise. So here in this one shot in the light, you can see just a regular kitchen scale being used as a thrust meter. Cutting from here to something that many people will be familiar with from science videos online. This is the Rubens tube, so showing, again, oscillations, this time acoustic waves in a tube full of gas, and you can see the harmonics at certain frequencies. It's a fun little science demo. Cutting now to some car airbag footage. I'm going to back that up because I think we just cut to ourselves on video. Car airbags are something that are very violent and destructive. And so I did a bunch of just footage of car airbags, seeing if we could use them for certain propulsive elements. And so just a test, we did this on a little dummy. This is why you shouldn't put your baby seat in the passenger seat.
So clearly don't try this at home.
Yeah, don't try it with a real baby. By the way, we do have a number here if people want to call in. It is 1-804-4-HASSLE. And we have a phone here. We can take your calls if there's anything you want to talk to us about. This is real-time speed of what happened to our mock baby with that airbag. Here's a passenger side airbag inside a 55-gallon drum full of water. You can see it reaches quite a dramatic height. A skateboard with a car airbag. We were attempting to launch the skateboard, but what it actually does is snap it in half. So did you ever skate?
No, well, I did once, and the first time that was enough. The first time I was able to control myself well enough to actually pass somebody as I was skateboarding, I promptly, I don't know, I hit a rock or something and ended up just falling flat on my face.
This is a cake that I had the art department make me with a car airbag inside it. The cake is actually made out of Twinkies, which will become apparent as they cruise sort of gracefully past the camera. It's very, very Star Trek feel to me, like Twinkies in space.
Something beautiful about just the, I don't know, I guess I never thought that Twinkies could be beautiful.
Growing up, the only thing I knew about Twinkies was out of comic books, and they just seemed like the best thing ever. I was so let down when I came to the United States and discovered what a Twinkie really was.
You have no Twinkies in Australia?
No, we didn't get those. Here's some airbags in a car, just sort of displaying why, even in a a small collision. The airbag could save your life. It could also cause you some serious problems. I've actually never been in an accident where the airbags have deployed, which I'm thankful for. How about yourself?
I've never been in an accident in a car that had airbags. So most of the time I felt lucky the gas tank didn't explode.
Yeah, that's, Hollywood made me very scared of even the most minor car accidents. This is a compressed air cannon that I made, and shooting a can of Boddington's Pub Ale out of it.
Quality.
Yeah, we don't skimp on our beer can explosion demonstrations.
So about how fast was that can leaving the tube?
It's hard to say. Maybe 50 feet per second or something like that. This is not shot particularly fast. It's 1,000 frames per second or something like that, I think. But you can see here, more than enough to completely flatten the can against the brick wall.
What's the name of the device?
The Luftwaffe, which is German for air thrower. Although actually, in that particular shot, it was compressed carbon dioxide out of a fire extinguisher.
And just your regular run-of-the-mill store-bought fire extinguisher?
Yeah, pretty much. The carbon dioxide one.
Mm-hmm.
Just rethreaded the tube so that I could plug it into my device.
Right.
But that's a really easy way to get about 200 psi quickly. Most air compressors won't go up that high. So
That's true. You need something industrial.
that's why a lot of paintball tanks. Oh, this is very interesting. Back in World War I era, when they had propeller planes with machine guns, they made interrupters. So the machine gun would only fire between the blades of the propeller. It would actually fire through the propeller. So I built this interrupter that would fire the machine gun through the blades of the propeller without hitting them, to replicate what would happen in World War I. And then in the next shot, you'll see what happens when we misalign the interrupter so it shoots right through the propeller. Vickers machine gun. I was impressed by how strong the propeller was, that it could take a machine gun bullet and not shatter, just make a little hole in it.
I mean, it was a major problem at the beginning of the war because they had to mount the machine guns on the fuselage so that pilots would come back with the entirety of the propellers just shot away, have to glide into the field.
Yeah, it's remarkable that they could build these mechanical devices to align.
Definitely.
This is a Tesla coil with Dr. Megavolt. Tesla coil. Anyone who's been to the Boston Museum of Science and been to their electric demonstration will have seen Tesla coils and also Van de Graaff generators. And so he's taking some high voltage arcs to the head there. And then this stool shot is pretty interesting. It seems to be going right through the wood of the stool, but I think there's a metal screw there that the electricity is going through before it arcs to the floor. Every mad scientist should have at least one Tesla coil, I feel. You were telling me something just before we started about Tesla coils, I think. Certainly, I don't know about in literature, but in old film, Tesla coils were extremely popular.
Tesla coils, in general, tend to be popular just because they're so strange looking. It definitely seems like something that is at home in an evil laboratory, despite the fact that I'm not actually sure if there's much use for them other than just studying electricity and understanding how it works.
Yeah, I think a lot of the sort of research interest is because you're in sort of lightning research and studying like large cross-air discharges, like what happens in lightning. It's sort of the closest we can get in the lab.
Which bringing up the similarities between these arcs and lightning is interesting because you might have noticed that the fellow in the video is wearing earmuffs to protect his hearing, right? And that's because of there's the tremendous cracking that happens when this thing arcs, just like the thunder that follows lightning, except on a smaller scale and inside.
Yeah, Tesla coils discharge at a higher frequency than the Van de Graaff generators. So if you go to the Boston Museum of Science and see their demo, It's like really sharp crack from the Van de Graaff, and the Tesla coil is more of a sort of really aggressive buzz. And people have actually made Tesla coils that will operate at different frequencies so you can play music on them, which is pretty cool.
That is pretty neat.
Here we can see discharges from the Tesla coil into a fluorescent tube cause the tube to light up, because the tube is basically a gas discharge tube. So the arc comes in and then flashes through the tube and lights it up.
What's interesting to me is that I would have made the assumption that you would have to have some way for the electricity to drain out the back end of the tube in order for it to light, but clearly that's not true. I would imagine that you needed to have a flow of electrons through the gas, but I don't actually see it leaving the bottom of the tube anywhere.
Yeah, there's a little bit of arcing into the guy's costume, into his hands, and then there's some discharge into the atmosphere. So a lot of those electrons can just attach to atoms in the air, and dissipate that way. There's a lot of voltage involved. There's not a lot of net charge that has to escape.
Okay.
This is a little fun thing here to end. So we've got some balloons full of propane that the Tesla coil is going to puncture and then ignite. So a little bit of eye candy once those balloons finally fail.
And are they failing because of the heat of the arc, or are they failing for another reason?
Yeah, locally, when the arc finally goes through the balloon, it'll punch a little hole, just like doing a pinprick.
Right.
And rupture the balloon. And there's enough, just like using an electric cigarette lighter,
right,
piezoelectric spark ignited, there's enough energy in that spark to ignite the gas. Fireballs, very pleasing to look at in high speed. It sort of gives me the feel of the burning Yule log at Christmas.
Oh yes.
Just watching the flames is very relaxing.
Yeah, the classic tradition. I think it's interesting when the balloons initially rupture. You can kind of see where the gas has forced itself out and has tried to expand into the room, and like all the little bits and pieces, the trailers of gas will ignite, and the spreading of the fireball I think is really neat because you can kind of track the movement of the gas and the way it goes.
Yeah, so here's some more flame and some metal sparks. So pumping some iron powder through that flame to get sparks. So doing little pyrotechnics in the laboratory to look at the different kind of qualities of sparks from different metals. So this is, as I said, iron. You get like a nice kind of golden spark without a lot of branching. It's pretty interesting to me. Machinists can tell the difference between different metals by just sticking it on the grinder for a second, and they can tell you what kind of steel it is based on
because of color.
The color of the sparks and whether the sparks pop and branch.
Well, I never realized that I could never be a machinist. I'm colorblind, so apparently I'll add that to the list of jobs that I can have.
So this is a different metal. This is magnesium being pumped through. And you can see very, very different quality to those sparks. There's a lot of popping and branching there. It looks almost like something out of outer space.
This looks almost like a desktop wallpaper of like an artificially colored Hubble photograph.
Yeah, yeah. You can imagine if this was a time lapse from like 100 million years in a galaxy, right? You could see all these stars being created and burning out. A real God's eye view of the universe.
Right.
And another little bit of eye candy here, going back to the cigarette lighters we just talked about. Here's a Zippo lighter being filmed in slow motion.
This is interesting to me, as you know, I've used Zippos in the past, and usually if there's enough fuel to make a fireball like that, it catches. But I'm seeing here that
You guys are all under arrest. Get out of here. The show is over.